It's finally here. I never thought I'll be saying this out loud, but should you pull on SEELE's banner? We're going to be talking about the overall strength of this banner in terms of like how well and much value this banner provides in terms of the individual characters' strengths and weaknesses. But also I'm going to be giving very quick tips in terms of how to form strong teams based on the combination of characters we have here on this banner, plus the free units we have in game as well. I think the main consideration for most people is not whether you can get SEELE, because let's be honest, if you reroll long enough in your account and you spend hours rerolling, you likely will be able to guarantee this character. And for those of you who are planning to reroll, I've done a very efficient tactic to reroll your accounts, which I think you might be interested to find out to save yourself some time as well. But for the rest of us who just want to know that this banner's value, whether it's worth it to pull on this banner, do stick around to the end. I think there's tons of value in this video for you as well. This is going to be a 3 weeks banner cycle, which means that from the 26th of April to the 17th of May, we're going to get SEELE's banner, and 3 weeks thereafter, we likely will be getting Jingyuan's banner. So what this means is that Honkai Staro can expect to have a similar timeline to Genshin Impact, where we have 6 weeks per pack. This is very nice because conveniently for when you're playing the other games, their high key periods is their other games' low key periods and stuff like that. Very interesting if you ask me in terms of how they allow players to cross over the platforms as well. So now let's talk about this banner real quick. In very brief summary in terms of how overall strength of this banner is, I would say that this banner is a mix of early game as well as late game excellence. Characters like Pella does scale better in the later game, whereas for example characters like Natasha are very strong early on already. SEELE herself generally is more of like a later game character, especially when you compare her with characters for example like Yanqing, Su Sang as well as Dan Heng. And Hook on the other hand is a very strong single target damage dealer of the destruction class, but generally does need a little bit more support to pop off as well. If you were to ask me like an overall rating for this banner, I would think it's like a 6 to 7 out of 10 in my opinion. Definitely pulled up by Natasha, although she's already pretty free as well, and her Eidolons in terms of what you get doesn't offer tremendous amounts of value. The one that I really am interested to guarantee from this banner at least, or quote unquote guarantee because it's all RNG, is really Pella. Pella is a character that does AoE defense breaking in terms of the entire enemy team, and defense break, for those of you who don't know, like in turn-based games, is exceptionally valuable as the later we go on into the game. Why is that the case? Because it doesn't matter whether your DPS scales with attack, defense or HP, defense break is universal by reducing the enemy's resistances or defenses rather. This means that no matter what you skill with, you will always be doing more damage, and that's why defense break characters are much better. And for those of you who just want a general landscape, majority of the characters we have, as you see here on launch, are actually attack based scaling, so she is much more beneficial for the long run. Okay, now that we have got that brief description out of the way in terms of like the 3 characters, I've done more like tier list videos already on the channel to like pit these characters, these 4-star characters against each other. Do check it out if you are interested in like more niche information as well in terms of the 4-star comparison. But now let's talk real quick in terms of what teams will I expect to build based on like the free units we have together with these team composition as well. We're going to start off with like the first team that I have for SEELE, and of course we're going to be making our way and splitting it into 2 later on. So let's say we have the best of luck, whatever we have in this game, and we manage to secure all 4 of these unique characters. Of course Natasha is free, so it's really guaranteeing these 2 other characters as well. Firstly, I wouldn't play Hook together with SEELE in the same team. The reason for that is because Hook is a single target, very strong single target fire damage dealer in nature, and SEELE is already so strong at single target. So for now, I'll be leaving Hook out. And in terms of this composition, I would definitely want to run a Natasha together with SEELE to provide a bit more defensive ability as well. She is not like Yanqing, who requires some protection in terms of if she gets hit, she loses some damage and stuff like that. She's relatively independent, but she's a bit squishy, so she does want to be healed up a little bit too. And a character that I'll put in the 3rd slot will be a character like Asta. She does flat speed buff to the entire team and also gives very strong team-wide attack buffing. This opens the 4th slot available for most players to either run an AoE DPS. For example, if you really like maybe Serval's design, she's also a free character we get from the pre-registration rewards, you can play Serval. You could also play a character like Herta in the 4th slot if you are really fascinated by her Kuru Japanese VA as well. It really opens up in terms of the team composition you have for your 4th slot. What this implies in terms of this team running is you have Asta here who is going to be using quite a bit of skill points, but you have very strong amounts of fire break damage, good amount of quantum break damage, and you have an option of running either lightning as well as ice break damage in the 4th slot. Pretty flexible. You could of course swap Asta out if you don't need so much speed buffs, attack buffs, because SEELE already has inbuilt speed buff on her own. You could of course run a character like Fire MC once you transition later on, or when you start off with Physical MC, you can move on to Fire MC later on, and this team is also pretty strong. Although, based on my experience, I do think running Natasha and Fire MC in the same team is a bit of an overkill in terms of defensiveness. It's very strong, but you could of course use one of them in your second half of your team as well, and that's what I'm going to be talking about right now. We're going to be now splitting up this single team into 2 different teams, and this is when actually the characters you pulled like Pella as well as Hook come more into the picture. And the reason for that is because SEELE already does a lot of what Hook does in a single team, but you need 2 teams for Memory of Chaos. And my biggest issue, for example, with Hook is she competes very strongly with Danheng. Danheng is already a very strong single target dealer, and if you want to build Hook, for example, you really have to choose whether you choose carefully whether you want to build Danheng, and he's already such a strong unit. So I'm just going to put them side by side here, just under SEELE in the 1st slot. So this is the first like single target damage dealer that you will have to be choosing, and personally I would really recommend you go with Natasha as well as Asta in their combination in terms of how valuable they are together. They work really well because Natasha does give quite a lot of net positive skill points. She does normal attack quite a bit, and Asta generally drains more skill points than she provides. So this pair actually neutralizes each other's like skill point requirements and surplus very well too. So now that we have like in the bottom half, okay, let's move these guys to the side real quick. And we want to play Pella because she's also a really strong unit. But playing her in this half means that you lack AoE damage. So we are going to bring her down to be an opposite role together with Asta in this team composition here. Asta gives like attack buff, whereas Pella gives defense breaking as well. So it's like that contrast. And in the contrast to Natasha, who's like a defensive unit, we are also going to be putting another defensive unit to so-called fill in the similar role, and that will be Fire MC in terms of the defensive position as well. We have a pretty balanced team so far. What both of them lack currently will be a little bit more on AoE damage. We then are able to bring in a character like Ting Chue. For those of you who don't know, Ting Chue also drinks like quite a lot of skill points, and you don't want to play her together with Asta. And this does leave like your last slot here open for one of these 3 characters here, depending on what you want to play. Generally, I would prefer to play someone of the odd element, because if Pella is ice already, you don't want to double down on the same element, or unless of course you know that floor that you're particularly tackling is like ice. That case, you want to run like a double ice to break the weaknesses much quicker. But let's talk generally. Let's say we don't know what element the floor is, and maybe it's like multiple rainbow element and stuff like that. We're going to just talk very briefly and generically. You don't want to mix or double down too much on the same elements early on as well, unless you know the floor's weaknesses. So I will go something like this: Ting Chue in the bottom half, or you have Herta in the top half, so you diversify out your elements. And as for Serval here, you can actually choose like, do you want her put her in to replace Herta, or do you want to replace Ting Chue? It's really quite flexible in terms of Serval, can really work in both situations, as she does very strong amounts of AoE damage. Personally, if you were to ask me, I prefer to run her together with Asta because she has one of the best in class attack stats already, and she does benefit quite a lot from a Harmony character's buffs in terms of light cones together with the percentage attack buffs that Asta provides. Now this team on its own is already very strong, but a lot of people might be actually looking for the second half because of a character like Ting Yun. She's already a very strong character. Some call her even the Bennett from Genshin Impact of Honkai Star Rail, a very strong energy and attack buffer, similar to Asta in a sense, but also very good in terms of single target damage buffing for a hyper carry character. Both Jingyuan and SEELE does appreciate her quite well as well. And if you ask me my opinion, I think that this team comp is already very fantastic. And if you like SEELE and you don't really like Jingyuan, it will not be really worth it to build on PT on a banner that you don't really like. What do I mean by build PT is like pulling on limited banners that you don't really want the 5-star, but you're just quote unquote stockpiling your savings. That's a very bad idea for gacha games in general. Don't build PT, okay? And if you guys are interested to know how like 5-star characters fit into this team composition, I've already done a dedicated team building guide video for SEELE where we really go in depth in every single permutation and combination, which is good, and I also share my thoughts there. Do click on this video if you're interested, or otherwise I will be doing a build guide video on SEELE once the game launches, which I'll put in the video card right here. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.